Hello. This is the 6th grade review for pages in your textbook 37 to 44 for the anatomy class. We're talking about the skeletal system, and you are going to follow along and take some notes if you would like to take these notes in your skeletal system page in your spiral, page 29. You're going to write your notes on here, and then that's what you'll take a picture of and submit to your assignment for the day. So the first section of pages that you guys had to read was pages 37 to 40. And that whole thing was all about the main subject of what do bones do. So there's 4 main things that bones do. The first one is that they protect. Your skull protects your brain, your rib cage protects your heart and your lungs. Your bones, your skeletal system is meant to protect. The second thing, number 2, that bones do is they make blood. Your bones actually make your blood cells, and they do it in what's called the red bone marrow. And we'll talk about where that is in a few minutes. The third thing that your bones do is store. It's storage. And now that happens in yellow bone marrow, and that is where it actually stores lipids, which just means fats, and minerals like calcium and vitamin D and the different things that you need. So red blood cells make blood. Yellow bone marrow is your storage unit. Now number four, the fourth thing that your bones do, it allows movement. If our bones were simply fused together, we walk like stick people. Instead, we have what's called joints. Our bones are connected at hinges called joints, and it allows for our movement. If we didn't have these, we'd look like, an octopus floating around all over the place, and we wouldn't have the ability to move with purpose. Now, within that first section, there was also a word. It's a disease called osteoporosis. And osteoporosis just means that your bones are very brittle, they're very weak. And what happens is in a layer of your bone, which I'll talk about in a second, the cavities are empty. So instead of having the minerals that it needs, there's empty vessels. So they're not very strong and they're very easy to break. Now, osteo literally means bone. So anytime that you see a word that starts with osteo, it has to do with something with the bone. And that's going to come up a few times over these next couple pages. Now, pages 40 to 42, that main topic was bone anatomy, meaning what's the structure of the bone? How is it made? What does it look like? So there's 3 layers. The outermost layer is very thin, but it's tough, and it's called the periosteum. Periosteum. Now, if you were to look at a bone, you're not going to see the periosteum. Once you can see the bone, it's because the bone has died, or the organism that the bone was in has died, and the periosteum has decayed at this point. It's just a bunch of cells and blood vessels. And once the living thing has died, that part dies off as well. So periosteum is not something we typically can see. The next layer of bone is what you would typically think of as bone. It's hard and it's smooth and it's like a white gray type color. That's called compact bone. This is the middle layer. It's called compact bone. And it is very hard. It is very thick. It's very smooth. It's what you think of when you would think, like, what does a bone look like? You would draw what you would think the compact bone looks like. And that is full of a word that starts with C. It's called collagen. There's these vessels and these canals that run through the compact bone full of collagen. That's where the osteoporosis comes in. Those parts are empty when somebody has osteoporosis. Now the last layer, the third layer, it's the innermost inside layer of the bone. That's called spongy bone. The spongy bone is the innermost interior of the bone. It is literally spongy. So if you think of a rubber band or a sponge, if you stretch it or bend it, as soon as you let it go, it goes back to its normal shape. Well, this spongy bone is a lot the same way. And it's kind of the reason why sometimes you can get a pretty gnarly injury and not actually break a bone. Your bone can bend and move a little bit before it breaks. Eventually, a sponge will rip or a rubber band will snap. Same with your bone. Eventually, it can't take much more and it will break. But spongy bone is meant to be, the vocab word is resilient. It can go back to its original shape. And that is full of tunnels and pores and all sorts of things. And that's actually where we find our marrow. Now, the red marrow, I said, makes red blood cells, and the yellow bone marrow is storage. It stores your fats and your lipids and the minerals and the different things that your bone needs. Now, your bone is we're not the same size as a baby. We grow over time because our bones are growing over time. Well, that process is actually called remodeling. It's not any fancy word. Sometimes you hear somebody say they remodeled their bathroom. So maybe they took all the walls down, they got rid of the shower, the tub, they got rid of everything, and they built it all brand new with fancy, shiny, new wallpaper and all that kind of stuff. They remodeled the bathroom. Well, the same for your bones. This part of this remodeling process in bones is your bone is literally getting rid of the old bone and making new bone. It's repairing and making new and replenishing bone all the time. So your bones go through this process of remodeling as you're growing all day long, every day. Now, jumping back into the word osteo. So we have two words starting on page 42 to 44. We have two words that we find: osteoblast and osteoclast. Now, osteoblast is just a cell that makes new bone. Osteoclast is also cells in your bone. They're both types of cells that eat away the spongy bone, widening the middle. So osteoblast, the B one, that's literally cells making new bone longer. Osteoclast, instead of making it longer, osteoclast is cells that eat away the spongy layer to make the insides thicker. If all we did was make something longer, we'd have these skinny little things in the middle that weren't enough to support us. That spongy bone in the middle would be a very tiny little narrow cavity, and it wouldn't be enough to support us. So as the bones grow with the osteoblasts, the osteoclast needs to come in and eat away some of the bone to make that cavity bigger and stronger to allow for our bone marrow. So those osteoblast and osteoclast are both very important in bone growth. There's another word that your book talks about called cartilage. Now, if you go like this and push on your nose or in your ear, it's kind of hard, but it definitely moves. It doesn't feel like bone, but it's not just skin either. That is cartilage. The tip of your nose and your ears are made out of cartilage, and there's cartilage all throughout your body in between your bones as well. It's kind of like a shock absorber. I want to make sure I don't go too far. I said that this review was supposed to be to page 44, so I want to make sure I don't get too far ahead. So cartilage is very important because you have these growth plates. I'm sure you've heard the word growth plate before. You have these growth plates which are at the end of your bones, and what happens as your bones grow, cartilage stacks up on the end of your growth plate, and that's how the growth occurs. Now, once the bone continues to grow longer, once that happens, this cartilage forms into bone, and that's why your bone can be bigger. But the cartilage initially acts as like a shock absorber. So you've got two hard things coming together, you need something soft to kind of stop it from breaking and splintering and wearing down. So there's cartilage in the middle, and as that cartilage, because your growth plate is on the end, as the cartilage continues to grow, eventually there's a lot of cartilage, and that can turn to bone, and that is how your bone grows. So cartilage begins to stack up on the growth plate. Joint cartilage literally exists in the middle of two bones in a joint, so that movements in the joint can happen without bone rubbing on bone. Your book talks significantly about growth cartilage and joint cartilage. So those two things I just said, it's still cartilage, but they're, depending on where they're at, they have a different job. So the growth cartilage is at the end of the growth plate, and that's what allows it to grow, but the joint cartilage stays in between to act as a shock absorber. Now, your bones, when you're born, like a baby, has, I think it was 300 and something. I think it's 300, if I'm not mistaken. 300 bones when a baby is born. But adults only have 206 bones. So where do the other 94 bones go? Well, bones can fuse. So you might have, like your skull, for instance, is multiple bones when you're born as an infant, and then as you grow, as you develop, as you get older, your bones, those two plates actually will come together and fuse and become one bone. So as an adult, as a human, as a grown-up, my skull is one piece. It's a bone. But as an infant, it was 5 bones. It was 5 different bones. That's what a baby's soft spot is. It's where the bones have not fused together yet. That's why you need to be careful with the baby's head. So bones, now that's only 4 or 5 different examples. There's 94 bones in your body that eventually get fused together to go from 300 to 206. So there are bones that fuse as you grow and develop. Now, fusion is not painful, and it's purposeful, and it's to help give more structure. So infants, we need to be very careful with, because some of their bones haven't fused yet, and they don't necessarily have the strength to be able to protect that section of their body, which is why we have to be so careful with babies. But sometimes bones break. So what happens when a bone breaks? Well, the first thing you need to know is that a bone that breaks will literally bleed. You've got bone marrow, you've got blood cells, you've got blood running through your bones. Bones will bleed when they break. That's their job. And when it does, it bleeds, at the break, it bleeds in this section. And the periosteum, remember the outermost layer of the bone, the periosteum kind of acts as a protective barrier, and it keeps that blood inside. And when that happens, it forms what's called as a blood clot. Now, blood clots, when you bleed on your skin, a clot is actually a scab. So blood clotting is very important. It's what stops the bleeding from happening. So your bone breaks and it bleeds and it forms a clot. And as soon as that clot forms, the osteoblasts, remember the cells, so the osteoblasts, those are the cells that make new bone, those come in and they start producing more bone inside that clot. And when they do that, it forms a callus. It forms a section of material that was a clot that's being transformed into bone. So it's not quite blood, it's not quite bone, it's called a callus. The osteoclast, the cells that are meant to come in and eat away to kind of make that space bigger, they come in and they eat the callus and make it appropriate, and new bone is formed. So the bone breaks, it bleeds, it forms a clot, a callus is created by the osteoblasts, and then the osteoclast comes in and does its job by getting rid of the callus and bringing it together, and the osteoblasts continue to make new cells. So there's a lot happening in order for your bone to heal, but it all happens with your cells. Now the largest bone, wait, I'm gonna stop right there because that goes on to page 45. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me. I hope that you were able to write those things that I just said on this page. You're gonna take a picture of it and you're gonna upload it to the assignment for today. And when we come back, our next section is gonna be actually about the bones. Before I go, I want to mention something. There is a really great YouTube channel, and I will link it in some of the assignments, but his name is Mr. Parr, but his YouTube channel name is Parr Mr. He's a middle school science teacher who rewrites songs, like common radio songs, to have new lyrics about science terms. And I would like for you to check him out. He's got some really great ones in there. It's always easier to memorize information to a tune. So when you learned the ABCs, you didn't just sit down and have to memorize a bunch of letters. You learned a song, A, B, C, D. It's always to a song. That helps us remember a lot of information with a tune. So learning the bones, there's going to be some songs that I think that you should learn and that you should listen to help you learn some of these terms. Mr. Parr has a good one called The Parts of a Skeleton, and his other one is called The Bone Song. I would like for you to start checking those out and learning them and listening to them. Even just kind of have it playing while you're doing your work. His songs have the pictures, the slides have all the lyrics, so you can read along and see our vocab words and kind of see how it relates to each other. But while you're hearing them, while you're reading them, you're going to hear him saying them. So it will help you learn how to pronounce the words as well. So again, that's Mr. Parr, The Parts of a Skeleton, and The Bone Song. The last thing I want to mention and this is not a requirement, but it is something that we're going to be doing in class, and I would encourage you to do it, is I found at the Dollar Tree skeletons. I don't know if you can see them in the background over there. They're just a bunch of skeletons. I'll walk over here. And like I said, they're from the Dollar Tree. They're out right now because it's Halloween time. Now these guys are going to be really great. We're going to do this in class where we actually, as we learn our bone words, we are going to write them right on the skeleton. In fact, this is my little guy right here, and I have started to write the words of the bones right there on him. So you can see you can see his cranium and his pelvis, his femur, his ulna, his radius. So we are going to be writing the words right onto the bones. I mean, the bone words right onto the actual bone. This also came from the Dollar Tree. This is just an example I'm going to use in class as I'm teaching these different things. And then the last one is this guy, his hand, and I wrote all of the bones in your hand on here for when we get into the hand assignment. So if you have the ability, this is not a requirement, but if you have the ability to go to Dollar Tree and get some of these Halloween decorations, I would encourage you to do that. It will be a really good study tool, and it'll be important for you in learning kind of where these body parts are and where these bones are in your skeleton. If you have any questions, definitely send a message to me, and I will see you later.